Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, we got some information on the changes to Warcries that are coming in Path of Exile's Harvest expansion, which is about 2 weeks away. We also got a little snippet of news, though, that was hidden away on Reddit that may have flown under the radar. So let me introduce the Greatest Intentions Divination card, which is going to be a little bit of a doozy. It's a Divination card, set of 10 for the Saviour, which is a chase unique item that drops from Cirrus, the Awakener of Worlds. It's only available when you defeat Cirrus at Awakener level 8, and it's also believed to have maybe a 1 or 2% drop rate. No one has done any definitive testing on this. The largest sample size Cirrus kill set that I'm aware of is 100 kills, and that person got 1 of the Saviour. So needless to say, it's pretty rare, but we don't know whether it's more at the 0.5% drop rate or more at the 3 to 4% drop rate. Any of those are possible. I personally speculate that it's maybe 1 or 2%. Anyways, this is going to drop two-implicit corrupted. And that's an interesting one, because with one-handed swords, which the Saviour is, the corruption pool is very small and has a couple of juicy ones and has a horrible trap as well. So first up we have Fortify on melee hit. This is incredibly powerful. This is the best of the corruptions. This is the best of them by a long way. This will provide you with a significant defensive layer when you're using the Saviour to kill enemies. Or, more significantly, when you're using the Saviour essentially as a stat stick to make your other weapon better. So this is the dream hit. You'll notice that it's available on item level 1 and up. We'll come back to that in a sec. Secondly is chance to gain Onslaught on kill for 4 seconds. This is pretty good. This is one you'll be happy with for map clear. It's also completely useless on bosses, but I think it's generally a good corrupt. Increased area of effect is, the numbers on this are pretty low, 15 to 20%. That'll take a radius of 10 up to it won't quite get it up to a radius of 11. It'll take a radius of 30 and increase that to about 32. So there's some benefit to it. The numbers are okay, and this might actually be one of the better ones. I'll come back to increased flat physical damage. Increased attack speed is available, 5 to 7%, really good roll. Resolute Technique is a stinker. This is an actual stinker that will ruin the item. So what Resolute Technique does is it's a keystone that causes you to be unable to deal critical strikes as a drawback, and then as a benefit, your hits can't be evaded. This has a niche in the game for low power characters. It's pretty good when you're leveling a character, but by the time you get even into early mapping gear, Resolute Technique becomes a trap. You would deal more damage by just accepting you're sometimes going to miss, and then being able to deal critical strikes and get all the extra damage, all the extra status effects that comes with them. So, Resolute Technique is terrible. This means that because you can only get Resolute Technique by corrupting item level 40 and up swords, you actually want to be turning in the Saviour on a character that is level 39 or lower. If you do this, then the sword's item level will match your character's level. That's the way that all divination cards work. If they don't specify an item level, they are whichever is greater. Your character's level? Sorry, they are whichever is lesser. Your character's level or 80. So your item level of your Saviour can be set to anything you desire between 1 and 80 by turning it in on a character of that level. And because this set is so expensive, the Saviour is an item that often starts a league at 50 exalts and then falls down to 10. Because this item is so expensive, you're going to want to ensure that you level a character just for the purpose of turning this in. So, you're wanting to turn it in on a level 39 or lower character so that you never end up wasting your sword on a Resolute Technique Saviour. There's also these flat physical rolls, which are usually really hotly desired on physical swords. These are really good rolls on most weapons. I don't actually think they synergize that well at all with the Saviour, and so for this reason I'm going to suggest turning it in on a level 30 or lower character. You can't get rid of the item level 1 roll by any means, but the item level 31 roll isn't particularly desirable either, in my opinion. The other roll that comes up is percentage increased physical damage. You cannot possibly get 85 because the divination cards that you turn in will be capped at item level 80. So for that reason, it doesn't matter what level you're turning it in here. So all of this put together, if you're turning in a set of the Saviour, turn it in on a level 1 to 30 character if you agree with me that the second tier of flat physical damage is not a desirable roll. You don't want it diluting the drop pool. If you disagree with me and you think this is a desirable roll, 4 to 7 flat physical damage, then in that case, you want to turn it in on a character that is level 31 through 39 inclusive. And yes, it is worth rolling a new character just to do that. Now, that we've said that about the Saviour, let's get back to Warcries. So, the changes to Warcry skills were announced today, and there was also a little extra note that was hidden, which was linked to on Reddit, which is this new keystone that's being added. Call to Arms is a keystone that will make using Warcries instant, and all Warcries share their cooldown. This is basically taking the steam from one of the notables that exists on the tree. The important thing here is that this is going to impose a very serious opportunity cost for picking up this node. At the moment, you can anoint instant Warcries. In 3.11, that ability is going away. You are going to need to path to wherever Call to Arms is on the passive tree. I believe, and I'm not certain of this, but I believe from some of the screenshots that have been shown, that it will be at about between 6 and 7 o'clock on the passive tree on the very, very far outer rim, a little bit west of the various frenzy charge nodes that are down there. So in the outer rim of the duelist area, 6 o'clock on the tree, there's the various frenzy charge nodes, and a little bit to the west of that is where Call to Arms is going, I believe. I could be wrong. I've only seen, I'm only extrapolating based upon where this looks like it is from another screenshot that was shown. So, changes to Warcry skills that are happening. They're saying here that some time ago, GGG decided that they wanted to do a balance pass that focused on two-handed weapons and the slower but stronger playstyle. Now, this hasn't really had a place in the game for some period of time, so it's something that they're looking to change. And they decided that they wanted Warcries to have an identity of synergizing with two-handed, big, slow attacks. So, our first step in doing this was to define for ourselves what a Warcry should be and what function it fulfills. And they decided that this should release a shockwave which taunt enemies, apply either a buff or a debuff where its power is based upon nearby enemies, and exert or power up your next few attacks with special properties. So these rules can be flexible but provide a base starting point of what Warcries should look like in the new system. We start by reworking existing Warcries to fit into this set of rules, and then we made new ones to fill any gaps that we felt were present. We also changed the mechanics of nearby enemies to care about the power of these enemies. I really like this change in theory. In the old system, 5 small monsters would provide 5 times the Warcry benefit compared to a single boss. This felt wrong, and this system now counts magic, rare, and unique enemies proportional to their power. So this means that magic monsters count as 2 monsters, rares as 10, and uniques as 20. This is subject to change, but it's really good change, I think, as it currently stands, because it's going to make it so that Warcries will work really well against bosses. None of this, I know I've certainly found it when I've done Labyrinth for the first time on a character, and it's taken 3 Enduring Cries to get up to max endurance charges, and you feel really squishy until that point. That's not going to be the case. Now you'll be able to release an Enduring Cry early, and potentially get straight to 3 because Izaro's a boss and he's right near you. So, Enduring Cry received a relatively minimal rework. We wanted to see if we could improve various aspects of the skill while we were reworking the others. It still grants endurance charges based upon the power of nearby enemies, but it also provides a very short burst of very powerful healing. It also temporarily grants you additional resistance and physical damage reduction for a short duration. So, this is the powerful self-heal / self-shield. In this sense, it may even serve a somewhat similar role to Molten Shell, and I see no reason that you can't use the two of them together. So you'll cast Enduring Cry when you feel like you're about to take a big hit, gain some endurance charges, and put yourself into this short-lived resistance and physical damage reduction state, so that you can then endure whatever's coming. Additionally, it provides a short burst of powerful healing. This would be incredible to have on cast when damage taken, but cast when damage taken was reworked long ago to no longer interact with Warcries at all. Warcries are not spells, and therefore that doesn't work. So many of you might have been thinking of that. Sorry. Now, unlike other Warcries, Enduring Cry does not exert your next few attacks. Its benefits are purely defensive. Good, that's its role. That is its niche. I think many people will want to experiment with the new ones, but Enduring Cry will still be ye olde faithful that does what it's always done. It keeps you alive. Next up we have Intimidating Cry. Now this was previously only available through a unique item, and it was so unmemorable that I have no idea what that unique item was or what Intimidating Cry was doing. In addition to it now being available as a skill gem, it has undergone a full rework to be a lot more punchy and exciting. Its benefits are purely offensive. It achieves this by intimidating nearby enemies, so intimidated enemies take 10% increased attack damage, and exerting your next few attacks to deal double damage. Wow. It also provides a buff that lets you ignore some of your enemy's physical damage reduction based upon nearby enemy power. Note, we'll reveal what number of exerted attacks each Warcry creates closer to launch. So the ability to double the damage of some of your upcoming attacks is going to be huge. That's well worth taking a little bit of time off attacking in order to cast Intimidating Cry, to shout Intimidating Cry, because it's cast is the wrong term, it's not a spell, and also makes Call to Arms seem like a really solid option here. It's intended to be the offensive counterpart to Enduring Cry. It should work in a wide variety of builds to make your next few attacks feel really powerful. Now, one thing I want to add here is that the immediate synergy that I'm seeing with this is using it in conjunction with Vaal Ground Slam. Vaal Ground Slam does enormous damage and stuns pretty much everything. In conjunction with double damage from Intimidating Cry, that's going to be a more impactful stun, and it's going to be even better at stunning things. I've not played a build based around Vaal Ground Slam in the past, but I have used it as a utility skill back in the Legion League when I was playing a Berserker Cyclone character, and that Berserker Cycloner was using Vaal Ground Slam as a 4-link, as a way, sort of as an I'm in trouble, help, buy me a couple of seconds so that I can get control of the situation again button. And it was working really well for that. Now, if you can throw an instant Intimidating Cry just before that, then that is looking really, really, really juicy. So I'm keen to see how this works. And in fact, I'm excited enough by the sounds of this that I would seriously consider looking into playing some sort of character that's based around Ground Slam and Vaal Ground Slam together, and that uses Intimidating Cry, that makes some modest investment into stunning, but only picks up the low-hanging fruit there, because you can stun map bosses really regularly, and you may also be able to stun even bigger bosses on a critical hit, especially when you're dealing double damage. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing how Intimidating Cry works in practice. The other thing I really like about Vaal Ground Slam, and I know I'm going on about that skill a lot, its synergy with Xerfi's Heart is great. Xerfi's Heart is one of my favourite underutilized uniques in the game. It is very rare and it's very expensive if people actively want it, but it hasn't been in hot demand in recent leagues, and it provides an enormous buff. You gain Soul Eater for 20 seconds after you cast a Vaal skill. Now, Soul Eater causes you to gain a massive stacking buff whenever you kill an enemy, and so what this does is, your first use of Vaal Ground Slam stuns everything around you and buys you time to start killing monsters. Then you start killing monsters with your real skill, which might just be Ground Slam, and then you just become like a literal god for the remaining 20 seconds of that Xerfi's Heart Soul Eater. But because Vaal Ground Slam stores 2 charges by default, you're also in a position that you still have a second use of Vaal Ground Slam saved up in case you need it, or once your Soul Eater fades, you've got the ability to use it straight away again. You don't need to wait out a whole period until you can use your Vaal skill again. I will, however, point out that that using starting one instance of Soul Eater when you already have one going is a non-bo, it's not a combo, and so that's not something that is quite as powerful as it sounds like it might be. Starting a new instance of Soul Eater erases your previous one and all the souls you built up. Anyway, so, asides about Zephy's Heart and Vile Groundslam aside, Intimidating Cry is interesting. Ancestral Cry is the third Warcry. This is a new Warcry which was designed to work specifically with strike skills. It causes your next few strikes to also target nearby enemies, similar to the Ancestral Call support. All I can say is this sounds amazing. This is a way to level a strike character. I'm hoping that you can get your hands on Ancestral Cry at reasonably low level. Doesn't necessarily need to be something that you get at level 12, but it would be really nice to have this by level 28 at the latest, and ideally before then. You'll then be able to use it to mow down multiple enemies at once while you're leveling through Acts 3, 4, 5, and so on, and then be able to get yourself up to maps quicker. And also I think this will continue to be good against trash monsters in maps. I'm thinking that you might find a situation where you're using multiple Warcries on the same build, with Ancestral Cry being your go-to for anti-trash monster work, and Intimidating Cry being your go-to when you're fighting a single monster. And there's nothing stopping you from binding both of them. They're not skills that require so many links that you can't do that. So, next up we have Seismic Cry. Now, I was initially really down on Seismic Cry when it was first revealed. I've come to like it a little bit more from watching the video, and we'll get to that in a sec. We created a new category of skills known as Slam skills, and wanted to make a Warcry that synergizes with these skills. It causes your next few Slam skills to have an increased area of effect and more damage, which both increase with each attack until you reset the Warcry or your exerted attacks run out. It knocks enemies back and interrupts them when it taunts them. Now, I was really concerned about that at first because knockback can be really frustrating when you're mapping, but trust me, I've watched the video of it and I'm no longer that concerned about it. It then grants you a buff based upon nearby enemy power, which reduces enemy stun threshold, making it easier to stun enemies with your hits. Again, Seismic Cry and stun, this is a synergy that's strong. I do think though that I'm likely to go Intimidating Cry if I'm going to be trying to stun anything, because double damage is just that good. Seismic Cry in the video looks good because the knockback distance is short and the increased range seems to be huge. So this means that you're not knocking enemies out of your slams, you're knocking them away from you, buying you time, but they still stay in your exerted slam radius. At least that's how I think they'll be. If this has increased area of effect as its quality bonus, we might see a really weird situation where players actively want low quality on Seismic Cry, which will be a strange scenario. That would be if you wanted to avoid a situation where you're knocking back enemies further than the limits of your strike. Sorry, not of your strike, of your slam. Anyway, Rallying Cry. Rallying Cry, I think the best way to describe this is that the old gem is being deleted and a new one is being created. There's basically none of the old uses of Rallying Cry really seem to carry over. The old uses of Rallying Cry were basically mana sustain and really sort of awkward way of doing that. Now, Rallying Cry has been reworked and given a new identity. It's traditionally worked well with support style builds, and we designed it to provide a new way to support allies. When they're talking allies though, at the moment Rallying Cry's main very, very, very limited use is helping other players that you partied with. This seems very much about helping various minions, such as the Guardian archetype that they introduced. I think they introduced this back in Delve when they brought out Herald of Purity and reworked Dominating Blow and a few other things. It never quite worked, the Guardian Summoner build, but this is something that plays to the strengths of that build and might help it get over the line. That's the sort of build that it's more oriented towards, rather than being a traditional aura support or a traditional Guardian mana Guardian support. It now causes nearby allies to gain a buff that grants them a percentage of your main hand's weapons damage based upon the power of nearby enemies. So the way that I read that is that imagine that you've got a 300 damage per hit weapon, and if you've got 16 nearby enemies, then there'll be some function of 16 and 300 that, maybe 16 translates to 25%. So all of your minions and all other players in the area gain 25% of 300 is 75 extra physical damage to their attacks. That's the way I read it. I could be wrong. And if instead of 16 monsters that were nearby, you had 24, then maybe instead of 25%, it might be 28%. And so you get 84 physical instead of 75. All these numbers, I don't even know what GGG are thinking. GGG wouldn't have had this worked out yet either. So it's all up in flux. But so it causes nearby allies to gain that buff. It also exerts your next few attacks to deal more damage based upon how many allies you have near you. So again, this is that Guardian Summoner archetype. Unlike most other Warcries, the power of the buff comes from both the number of nearby enemies and the number of nearby allies. So this is a rework to an existing skill to give it a new identity, aka delete the old skill, make a new one with the same name because it is so different. This obviously seemed to fit a very supportive type of role, but we wanted to do a new way to support allies. It works well with minions or to support a full party of allies. And can we just say that, if you're playing with a party, don't they count as minions too, other human players? Anyway, Infernal Cry. This was previously known as Abyssal Cry and has received a full rework. And they're not kidding here. This is being changed from a Chaos Gem to a Fire Gem, but I think the core functionality is still the same, and it looks quite different as well. We aim to keep its old features while providing some new, exciting ones to refresh its appeal. It covers enemies in Ash, a debuff that scales with the power of nearby enemies. It also causes enemies that are affected by this debuff to explode with fire damage when they are slain. So the current Abyssal Cry causes enemies that are affected by it, that are still currently taunted by it. When they are killed, they explode for 8% of their life as chaos damage. This will now be exploding for fire damage instead. We don't know what the numbers are like. It also exerts your next few attacks to trigger Combust when hitting an enemy. Combust is a triggered area of effects skill granted by the Infernal Cry Gem. It scales with attack damage modifiers and can benefit from your supports. Really got to see that in practice. Lastly, we've got General's Cry, which seems to me to be an unfinished skill gem, and they're not able to demonstrate it in the video, which we'll get to in a sec. This is an intense new Warcry that has been designed to be very open-ended in how it can be used. It's a skill support hybrid, which melee attack skills can be linked to. This Warcry summons ghostly mirage warriors from corpses near you. These ghosts use one of the link skills once before dissipating. So, they're using the skill once. This means that you want to have the hardest hitting skills available. I have to look into that. It may be Earthquake, it may be something else. Maybe it's Sunder. I'm not sure what the hardest hitting skill is nowadays. Maybe it's even something like Heavy Strike. The number of warriors that you summon is based upon the total power of nearby enemies, as well as the power of nearby corpses. So this will be of real interest when you're fighting monsters where there's a few adds that are unique. One thing that comes to mind is the boss of the Precinct map. Definitely comes to mind here. So the Precinct map boss is several rogue exiles, of which a couple of them are more dangerous than the others. And what you can do there is empower the extra. So a General's Cry will become better once you've killed one or two of these, and it'll help you dispatch the rest. It should also be really good in twinned boss fights, and who knows what else there'll be, later in the game. The other thing that comes to mind is blighted maps. Blighted maps will be absolutely crazy because of the number of corpses that you create in them. Anyway, so let's have a look at the video of the various Warcries. Now, I'm going to start by playing this at a quarter speed just to showcase how little the knockback is. And so that'll be on the Seismic one. So this is at a quarter speed, and you'll see that they're just not being knocked back very far there. Let's just jump back and watch that again, and a little bit further. That one there, that Avian Wretch there, just got knocked back maybe one of its own lengths, and then you see just how massive these augmented earthquakes are. Just having a look here at the support gems, it doesn't look like this player is augmenting their seismic cry with any sorts of increased area of effect that I can see. It said it's a little hard to work out. So this is Rallying Cry. It's really hard to see what's going on there, but it's again being used with these various. I think they're Sentinels of Dominance as well as the Herald of Purity minions. Ancestral Cry here. And you can see that there's a Warcry, and then suddenly those strikes start hitting multiple enemies. Here's Intimidating Cry, and it's really hard to see what's going on here. There's just not much information that's given. You will notice a couple of stuns on the Dunes boss here. And here's Enduring Cry, which again it's all in the numbers, so it's hard to work out what's going on. Infernal Cry. Now this is the one that causes monsters to explode, and potentially, at least if it's like Abyssal Cry, it causes chain reactions. We will see if that happens here. And splat, everything just dies straight away. That looked like a chain reaction the second time. So yeah, this looks like it's still functionally Abyssal Cry, but it's Abyssal Cry with a chaos damage theme gone and a fire damage theme replacing it. This is probably a buff, and the reason I say that is that even though enemies tend to resist chaos damage less than they resist fire damage, it's probably a buff because melee characters are much better at scaling fire damage explosions. There's several ways of doing that, and so I'm kind of interested to see exactly how that works out. The last little tip that's been mentioned here is that a new support gem is being added, which speeds up your Warcries in exchange for a slightly longer cooldown. I think this is going to be like Second Wind. It's just going to be a skill that's so good that you're going to feel you need to use it. Your Warcries on most builds, just the ability to make them faster is so significant that either you make them instant with Call to Arms, or you make them faster with this new support, or else they're just going to feel too clunky to use. That said, there's not much of a consequence to using this because there's not really many other supports that you want to use on a Warcry in general. Maybe you might want to use Enhance if you wanted to increase the area of effect of it by an enormous amount. That I think is quite a lot better than increased area of effect support. Maybe you want to use Empower, but probably not. And so yeah, I think it's just going to be whatever this faster gem is. So where do I think we're going to be? How do I think we're going to be building here? I think the default setting for players that have a 3-link spare will be to use Enduring Cry and Intimidating Cry with whatever this faster Warcry support is, and have them bound to 2 different buttons and use them strategically and as needed. Enduring Cry is just really strong for defense. Keep those endurance charges up so that you don't get, well, so that you're less likely to get one shot, and so that you're much more able to laugh off small hits. And then in terms of your other skills, Intimidating Cry synergizes really well, in my opinion, with Vile Ground Slam. If you're playing Vile Ground Slam, you also have Ground Slam as a skill, and so that seems like it's a potential starter build even there. Start as a Marauder. We'll have to work out whether it's better to go Berserker for more damage, or Juggernaut for more defense, or Chieftain for more fire damage synergies. That's going to be my starting point for if I decide to play down that route. However, whilst I think Enduring and Intimidating Cry is the default, there's plenty pulling me towards trying Infernal Cry and trying out General's Cry as well. Also, their Ancestral Cry will definitely have its uses. I'm not going to be playing a strike skill. I hate playing strike skills, but if you like playing strike skills, then forget everything that I said about Intimidating Cry and Enduring Cry. You need to run Ancestral Cry. Seismic Cry, I think, will be a very niche role player, as will Rallying Cry. but who knows, maybe the numbers on them are so good that they're worth making fit. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, I hope you have a good one.